This is a video by Richmond. Today we're working on a Chevrolet Impala. This happens to be a 2000 model. And what we're doing today is we're changing out the rear brake pads and rotors. Now the first thing we need to do is get the vehicle up in the air, support it on jack stands, and remove the rear tires and wheel assemblies. Okay, the first thing we need to do is move the caliper away from the rotor a little bit. So we'll stick a screwdriver right in this opening here and just pry the caliper away from the rotor just a little bit. Okay, there we go. That will give us a little play. Now, next thing we need to do is remove the two bolts that secure the caliper. There are two different sizes, so I would recommend that you mark one of them so you get it back into the right position. Now those bolts are 14 millimeter headed bolts. I'm going to be using a 6-point socket with a breaker bar, and I'm going to use a Babbitt hammer, and because sometimes these are on there quite well. Okay, now we need to remove those bolts. Okay, now after you get those bolts removed, you can remove the caliper. Now take something like a stiff wire and hang it from the coil spring on the rear shock. Alright, now next we need to remove the mount that holds the caliper and the brake pads. They're held on by two 13 millimeter headed bolts, and I would recommend a 13 millimeter 6-point socket for those. It is kind of a shallow head on that bolt and you don't want to round it off. Okay, now remove those bolts. Now once those bolts are removed, you can remove the mount. Now next we can remove the rotor, and hopefully it comes off easy. If it doesn't, you'll have to use some penetrating oil in here and tap the rotor. And there's the rotor all off. Okay, now that we got the mount off the vehicle, we can put it on the bench and we can remove our pads. There's the inboard pad. Now remember that the outboard pad has the indicator on it. There's the indicator. Now is the time to inspect the guides. Wipe them down, take a look at them, make sure they're in good shape. If they're not, now is the time to replace them. Now we can install our outboard pad and install our inboard pad. There we go. All ready to go back on. Okay, now it's time to put on the new rotor. Make sure that this flange right here is in good shape. Before you put it on, I'm going to put on a little brake grease on the rotor here, just so we can get it off in the future. Just on this little area right here. There we go. Okay, now we're ready to put our mount back in with our pads. What I've done here is put one lug to hold the rotor into position. And we can put the mount into place. Start our bolts. There. Now we need to tighten those up. Next we need to push the piston back into the caliper. You can use a C-clamp for this if you don't have one of these tools. Okay, now next I like to put a little brake grease on the contact areas of the caliper where it meets the pads. Make sure you get the little rubber boots underneath the caliper. There they are. Now don't forget to grease your pins also. Remember, these are different. The top is different than the bottom. There we go. Now we need to tighten those up now. Okay, that takes care of one side. Now all you have to do is do the same procedure to the other side. And when you get your wheels on, make sure that you pump the brakes to set the caliper. And that's it. You've just done a rear brake job on your Chevrolet Impala.